In the summer of 2007, a teenage couple vanished without a trace. 16-year-old Jessica Albott and her 17-year-old boyfriend, Matthew Medina, drove 2 hours out of town for a short hike. They never came back. No footprints, no dropped phone, no sign of a struggle, just gone. For most cases, that would have been the end, a tragic disappearance slowly fading out of public memory. But this one stayed alive for a very different reason. Because months after the teens vanished, the families started receiving letters. Strange ones, coded messages, fragmented sentences, rambling lines that made no sense and yet felt just personal enough to gut them. Sometimes the letters were from Jessica, other times from Matthew, sometimes both, signed together at the bottom like a plea for help. Jessica's family believed the letters were real. Matthew's family was certain they were fake, and that divide became part of the case's identity. Two families living in two different realities, each clinging to their own version of hope. 18 years later, the teens are still missing, and the letters never stopped. That's where I come in. I'm Detective Cassandra Maddox, assigned to the disappearance of a teenage couple, one of whom had potentially dangerous secrets. On the day of their disappearance, everything was normal. Jessica's best friend, Bree, said the two were practically buzzing. They'd been planning the hike for weeks, a quiet trail, a couple hours from home, far from the constant arguments and disapproval from both families. Bree said it was the first time they looked genuinely free. No yelling parents, no threats to break them up. Just a day that finally felt like theirs. They left around 10:30 a.m. A shared playlist, a packed lunch, and a single photo taken at the trailhead. The last trace they'd ever leave behind. Search teams combed the woods for days. Drones, dogs, volunteers, state police, nothing. No clothing, no footprints, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the forest swallowed them whole. Most investigators chalked it up to a runaway scenario gone wrong. The families, that's where things fractured. Jessica's parents blamed Matthew. Matthew's parents blamed Jessica. And with nothing to find and no suspect to point to, the case slipped into cold storage. Until the letters started. At first, they looked almost hopeful, with familiar names signed at the bottom. Jessica's family clung to the letters like scripture, convinced she was alive. Matthew's family dismissed them as manipulations, a cruel hoax meant to reopen wounds. For 18 years, the letters continued. By the time the case landed on my desk, the disappearance itself was barely the point anymore. It was the letters, 47 of them, that kept this case breathing. And from the moment I opened the first one, something felt wrong. Not with the message, with the voice behind it. I started reading through them in chronological order, but it was letter 14 that stopped me cold. Dated March 3rd, 2012, it read, "Mom, Dad, we're trying to get back. It's colder now. Matt says we shouldn't stop moving, but I'm so tired. There's a house nearby, a light. I think we're close. Don't come looking. It's not safe here. We'll try again tomorrow. Jessica." And then there was letter number 15 dated the May 18th, 2012. "Mom, it's harder to write now. My hands shake at night. Matt says it's the cold, but I don't think that's it. We're not alone out here. I hear footsteps outside when it gets dark. They stop when I look. Matt doesn't believe me. He says I'm tired, but last night someone whispered my name right outside the door. The light in the house keeps flickering. Every time it goes out, I feel like something is right behind me, watching. We're trying to leave soon. Please don't forget us. Jessica." Letter number 16, June 2nd, 2012. Dad. keeping this short because something's not right with Jess. She's not sleeping. She jumps at every noise. She keeps asking me if I hear them, too. I didn't. Not at first. But last night, I heard footsteps. Slow ones. Dragging across the porch like whoever it was wanted us to know they were there. Jess wanted to open the door. Said she recognized the voice outside. Said it sounded like you. It wasn't. I swear to you it wasn't. We're leaving the house tomorrow. We'll try the trail again. If we don't make it back, just know I tried. I didn't let her go alone. Matthew. I set the letter down and let my eyes drift over the rest of the case file. Papers that smell like attic dust and stale grief. That's when something slips out from between two reports and hits my desk. A Polaroid. Jessica and Matthew sit together on a plaid couch, a stone fireplace behind them, bundled in blankets. She's leaning into him. He's smiling straight at the camera. It should be comforting. It should be a normal couple photo. But then I flip it over. The date, written in faint pencil, October 30th, 2007, 8 days after they supposedly vanished on the 22nd. I turn the Polaroid back around, staring at it now with a detective's eyes. Not a casual glance. That's when I see it, in the reflection of the fireplace glass behind them. A figure, tall, still, standing just outside the frame. Someone was there with them. The letters talk about a house, a light in the window, footsteps on the porch. By the third or fourth note, the word cabin starts showing up, like it's the only safe place left for Jessica and Matthew. So naturally, I assume investigators checked it, except there was no cabin to report of. When I call the county records office, the clerk sounds confused. There's no structure in that area, she told me. Hasn't been one in over 50 years. I pull up forestry service maps, satellite imaging, and historical property listings. Nothing. No cabin, no storage shed, no foundation, not even leftover plumbing or a burned-out footprint. Just trees. So I go through the search logs myself, expecting to find at least one reference, a grid, coordinates, something. And that's when I realize the words house, cabin, and structure appear nowhere in the records, not once. But here's the part that actually makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I interviewed a retired volunteer, Tomas Rivera, who doesn't bother pretending he doesn't remember the case. He remembers too well, especially the part that never made it into the official report. According to him, the search teams never found a cabin, but they did find something else, a long-term camp, hidden deep off-trail, tucked behind a ridge. There was a tarp stretched between trees, a fire pit that was still warm, and food cans that were opened recently. Not months, days. Someone had been living out there, and next to the fire pit was the part that stops me cold, a stack of almost mailed envelopes, stamped, addressed to the Albot and Medina homes, the same handwriting and style as the letters the families received for 18 years, 47 in total. But Rivera insists there were at least a dozen more, ones he personally saw in that camp. None of them were ever turned into evidence, because the sheriff, according to Rivera, ordered everything burned. The tarp, the envelopes, a purple backpack found under the shelter, the same color Jessica was wearing in the trailhead photo from the morning she disappeared. Rivera remembers it clearly because it wasn't pristine. It wasn't placed. It was used. Dirt packed into the corners, a worn strap. And inside it, the detail that makes my stomach flip, a toothbrush with damp bristles. Something someone had used that morning. Rivera told me he watched the sheriff throw the bag and its contents straight into the burn pile. He never understood why. And standing there listening, neither do I. Because based on what he saw, the letters weren't just some sadistic hoax sent from a distance. They were written from the woods, from a camp someone was actively living in, a camp that held Jessica and Matthew's belongings. And if Rivera is telling the truth, the case didn't go cold on its own. Someone literally burned it. After Rivera's revelation, I go straight for the one place that never lies: personnel files. If a sheriff burned evidence in an active missing persons case, there should be something. Complaints, disciplinary notes, a suspension, even a whisper of misconduct. Except when I pull his records, I get the opposite. Sheriff Raymond Holt, 28 years in the department, a spotless career so clean it feels curated, like someone spent time polishing it long after the fact. I dig deeper. Internal emails, budget logs, shift assignments around the week Jessica and Matthew vanished. Nothing out of place or suspicious. Nothing that makes sense with what Rivera described. So I shift strategy. I go looking for the man, and that's when the first real roadblock hits. Sheriff Holt died 4 years ago, a heart attack at home. He was 62 years old. They had a closed casket funeral. Every person who worked under him left the department within 2 years of his death. Transfers, early retirements. A couple outright vanished from public records. It's the kind of quiet departmental turnover you only see when people are running from something unspoken. And then I find one more detail, a line buried in his obituary. Survived by one estranged son, Matthew. A son who would have been roughly Jessica and Matthew's age in 2007. His only child, name listed as Matthew Holt-Medina. It's the exact full name of the boy who vanished with Jessica 18 years ago. And yet, on every medical form, every liability document, every next of kin record, Sheriff Holt listed him as his son, not stepson, not ward, not foster, not godson. Son, which means one of three things is true. Either Matthew Medina wasn't who people thought he was, or Sheriff Holt wasn't who he pretended to be, or both men hid a connection so deep that the department cleaned every trace of it after Holt's death. I flip every page again, hoping I miss something. A mother's name, an address, a guardianship note, anything. There's nothing. No birth certificate, no paperwork tying them together. Not a single legal record explaining why the sheriff of a small town would privately claim a missing teenager as his biological child. But the timeline is what tangles my stomach. Jessica and Matthew disappeared in 2007. Holt kept listing Matthew as his emergency contact all the way until his death in 2021, meaning even after the case had frozen over, even after the search stopped, even after everyone accepted that the kids were gone, Holt still believed Matthew was alive. Or worse, he knew exactly where Matthew was. I finally tracked down one of the transfers, a former officer named Ilana Pike. She lives in a rundown apartment 2 states away. She told me a story so warped I had to will myself to hang on to every word, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Matthew Medina wasn't born a Medina. He wasn't even raised by them. Before the clean house in the suburbs, before the smiling family photos, he was Matthew Holt, the abandoned son of Sheriff Raymond Holt. His mother left him with his father when he was 6. Matthew's mother had been trying to report the sheriff for months. Abuse, excessive drinking, erratic behavior. None of it ever stuck. Holt made sure of that. And then one day she simply vanished. But that was only the beginning. The real revelation, the one that made my stomach drop, was the disappearance no one ever talked about. The one Matthew was tangled in years before Jessica. It happened when he was 13. The girl's name was Denise Patrick. She was a classmate, quiet, Smart. One of those kids who stayed after school for extra credit and didn't bother anyone. Matthew knew her from the art club. He wasn't a member, but he hung around the hallway where it met because it was warm and he didn't like being home. Teachers remembered seeing them talking a few times, described them as very friendly. Denise went missing on a Wednesday. Her backpack was found behind the gym, and her shoes neatly placed at the edge of the woods near the creek. No signs of a struggle. 2 days later, she was found at dawn by a highway worker 20 miles from town, barefoot, dehydrated, with leaves tangled in her hair and scratches up and down her arms. She kept whispering the same thing over and over. I followed Matthew into the trees. Doctors assumed shock. Police assumed attention-seeking. Holt shut the case down before anyone could assume anything else. But Ilana had the only surviving report, the one Holt missed. A teacher had come forward quietly, off the record. She'd seen Denise talking to Matthew behind the school the day Denise disappeared when they should have been in class. Matthew had his backpack with him. When investigators brought him in for questioning, Holt arrived before anyone could even speak to him. The interview never happened. The notes vanished. The teacher was mistaken. Denise's memory was unreliable. The case dissolved overnight. The officer's voice caught when she described how Denise was found. Shivering so hard she couldn't stand, her feet cut to ribbons, her hands stained with creek mud, and a single bruise across her wrist shaped like a grip. Denise never spoke again about who she followed. Ilana said after Denise was found, Matthew changed. He became volatile, explosive. 2 months later, he had a violent outburst, shattering glass, ripping through furniture, the kind of rage that comes from somewhere deep and fractured. That's when Child Services finally saw the truth hidden behind Holt's badge. The abuse, the drinking, the neglect. Matthew was removed within days, and at 15 he was adopted by the Medinas, a clean slate stamped over a childhood full of rot, all curated and controlled by one man who refused to let the truth see daylight. The next morning I drove to the Medina's house with one goal: fill in the blanks. I know Matthew's past now. I know the sheriff buried it. I know the adoption wasn't the fairy tale they pretended it was. But nowhere, not once, did any official report mention behavior issues after Matthew moved in. No disturbances, no police calls, no school suspensions. The kind of nothing that hides something. When I sit with his parents, Mark and Lillian, they look exhausted, like 18 years of pretending has finally run out of room. They tell me Matthew was quiet, polite, helpful around the house. Lillian then says softly, "We thought love was enough to fix him." She hands me a box. Inside are items they kept hidden from investigators, not out of malice, but fear. A stack of drawings, dozens of them, all the same scene. A figure standing at the edge of the woods, watching, waiting, head tilted unnaturally, eyes scratched out. On the back of each one, in jagged handwriting, "I don't want to follow him." The drawing started 2 months after Matthew moved in. Then there was the second item, a pocket knife the Medinas found buried under Matthew's mattress, rusted, with a faded engraving on the handle. R.H. Raymond Holt. The Medinas swear it wasn't in the house when Child Services dropped Matthew off. And then the final piece, the one that makes my throat tighten. A single page torn from a school notebook. Matthew's handwriting. Not a letter, not a drawing, a confession, or something close to one. It reads, "I tried to leave him there, but he followed me home." No date, no explanation, Just that. Mark tells me they hid it all because they didn't want their son labeled a monster. They thought therapy could help. They thought stability could help. They thought Jessica helped. She was the first person he opened up to. So when he vanished with her, they clung to the one truth that kept them functioning. Matthew would never hurt Jessica. The box in my hand says Matthew had a shadow trailing him long before anyone realized. It says he feared someone no one ever identified. And just when I start to close the box, I see a small envelope tucked in the corner. A letter. Not signed by Matthew, not signed by Jessica. Signed by someone else entirely. Someone with initials I've now seen carved into a knife, stamped into personnel files, and burned into this case like a brand. R.H. Inside the envelope is a message written in shaky handwriting. You took him from me once. I took him back. Raymond Holt has been dead for 4 years, but this letter was postmarked 8 months ago. The same postmark used on the letters supposedly sent by Jessica and Matthew. Every single one came from a 3-mile radius in a nowhere stretch of back roads between Ashford Pines and the old ranger station, an area that had supposedly been cleared during the original search. I drive out there at dawn. The post office clerk is half asleep, unimpressed, and absolutely ready to violate federal procedure for the price of a coffee and the promise that no one will ever know her name. She pulls the route records, and there it is. Every letter, Jessica's, Matthew's, and the one signed R.H., was dropped into the same mailbox. Route 19B, a rusted metal box at the end of an unmarked dirt road. A place the search teams never got close to. A place Sheriff Holt personally marked as inaccessible in his logs. I park beside the mailbox. It was empty. A shed sits about 20 yards back, crouched behind a curtain of overgrown brush. It looks abandoned in the way nightmares look abandoned. Too still, too quiet. The lock on the door is fused with rust. The hinges look welded shut by time. No fresh footprints, no drag marks, no signs anyone has come or gone in years. But the table in the center of the room, that's where the rot starts. Stacks of papers, letters, drafts, failed versions, pages rewritten over and over. Jessica's voice, Matthew's voice, even the ones signed R.H., all in the same handwriting. It hits instantly. Whoever sent these letters wasn't just mimicking them. They practiced. A lot. I move to the back wall and freeze, because it's covered, floor to ceiling, in photos. Personal ones. Jessica at her school's fall carnival. Matthew at a baseball game 2 towns over. The two of them in a group shot at some birthday party. Photos taken before they disappeared. From angles that indicate the photographer wasn't hiding. Someone who knew their routine, their friend circles, their habits. Whoever curated this shrine was obsessed. The person who wrote the letters knew Jessica and Matthew very well. They watched their lives, collected pieces of them, recreated their voices. But they haven't been back here in years. The mailbox was used, but not this place. Which means for at least 8 months, the person behind the letters has gone silent, and the teens are still gone. Not confirmed dead, not confirmed alive. Just gone. Whoever was in that shed is out there somewhere, and they didn't write the letters to comfort the families. They wrote them to keep the story alive, to keep Jessica and Matthew suspended in limbo. Then something else caught my eye. A Polaroid. I stare at the Polaroid again, one exactly similar to the one I found months ago, tucked in an old evidence envelope. Jessica and Matthew, on the couch, cozy, ordinary. except for the shadow in the fireplace reflection. The figure standing just outside the frame. The shadow in the Polaroid isn't a random passerby. It's the same person who curated this shrine. The same person who watched Jessica and Matthew for weeks, months, maybe years. The same person who made sure every letter reached the families just far enough to keep the story alive, but never close enough to reveal the truth. I kneel by the table and pick up one of the older photos, one of Jessica at the carnival. I angle it next to the Polaroid in my hand, the height of the photographer, the angle, the reflection in the glass. It all matches. The Polaroid wasn't proof the teens were alive 8 days after disappearing. It was proof they were still under someone's control. And the kids, they slipped into the kind of darkness you don't come back from. The kind that swallows whole stories, not just people. When I step out of the shed, the air feels wrong. Like whoever built this place hasn't been here in years, but could come back at any moment. The case doesn't end. It just goes quiet again. If you're still here, you're one of the curious ones. Stick around. The next mystery's already waiting.